People think monsters aren't real. They are. In 1996, I was recruited into an organization so secretive that even calling it by name feels dangerous. My job? Eliminate cryptids. Creatures that shouldn't exist but somehow do. Mothmen, skinwalkers, Jersey devils. We've been cleaning up humanity's mess for decades, ensuring these things don't end up on the nightly news. I got my assignments through coded messages, GPS coordinates, and a simple directive: kill or contain. In the fall of 2001, I received a particularly odd file. A remote village in Alaska, nestled near Denali National Park, had reported strange disappearances and sightings of a giant shadow with glowing red eyes. The photos attached were blurred but chilling. Claw marks on trees 3 stories high, a shattered snowmobile with deep gouges in the metal. The order was clear: find it. Neutralize it. Don't ask questions. Alaska in October is unforgiving. Snow blankets everything, and the nights stretch endlessly. The village of Casbuck was small, barely a dot on the map. When I arrived, the place was eerily quiet. Only a handful of people still lived there, and they avoided me like I carried a plague. I set up base in an abandoned cabin near the forest edge. The locals didn't say much, but one old man, toothless and wild-eyed, broke the silence. "You're here for the demon, aren't you?" he whispered. "Something like that," I replied. He shook his head. "You can't kill it. The last guy who tried. They found pieces of him frozen to the trees." On my second day, I ventured into the forest. It didn't take long to find evidence of something unnatural. Massive tracks. Bipedal, but with elongated toes ending in claws. Stamped into the snow. The stride was too long for any human, the weight too heavy. The forest itself felt wrong. The air was thick and suffocating, every sound swallowed by an unnatural silence. Even the wind seemed hesitant to move. And then I smelled it. A rancid stench like rotting flesh and sulfur. It clung to my clothes and filled my lungs, making me gag. Whatever was out here wasn't just a cryptid. It was something worse. That night, I set up traps around the cabin. Motion sensors, tripwires, and high-powered rifles loaded with tungsten bullets. Whatever this thing was, I wasn't taking any chances. Around 3 a.m., the first alarm went off. I grabbed my weapon and stepped onto the porch, the snow crunching beneath my boots. The moon cast a faint glow over the forest, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard it. A guttural growl, low and resonant, vibrating through the trees. My flashlight beam caught movement. A massive shape, hunched and impossibly fast, darting between the trees. Its eyes glowed red, like twin embers burning through the dark. I fired. The sound shattered the night, but the thing didn't slow. It barreled toward me, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then it stopped, just outside the circle of light around the cabin. It stared at me, its breath visible in the freezing air. And then it smiled. The next day, I went into town for supplies and met a woman named Lena. She was the only person who seemed remotely willing to talk to me. "Did you see it?" she asked. I nodded. She handed me a battered leather journal. My brother kept this before he disappeared. He was hunting it. The journal was filled with sketches and notes. Descriptions of the creature, its habits, its victims. One entry stood out. It doesn't just kill. It hunts for sport. It watches, learns. It's smarter than it should be. This isn't an animal. It's something else. The last entry was dated 2 days before her brother vanished. I think it's letting me see it on purpose, like it's daring me. I don't think I'll make it out of this. I spent the next 3 days tracking the creature. It led me deeper into the forest, to places untouched by human hands. The snow was deeper here, the trees older and gnarled, their trunks scarred by massive claw marks. The stench grew stronger the further I went, and I began finding signs of its kills. Half-eaten carcasses of moose and bears, their bodies arranged in strange patterns. At night, I could hear it. The growls, the snapping of branches, the sound of something massive pacing just outside my camp. It was toying with me. The tracks eventually led me to a cave hidden beneath a jagged outcrop of rocks. The entrance was massive, lined with bones that had been sharpened into spikes. Inside, the air was heavy and rank. The walls were covered in scratches, and the ground was littered with bones. Human and animal. In the back of the cave, I found something that stopped me cold. A pile of clothing and gear. Some of it was old, weathered by time, but some looked recent. I recognized one of the jackets. It belonged to Greg, a hitman like me who'd gone missing last year on a similar assignment. The thing had been collecting trophies. I set the last of my charges around the cave entrance and waited. The sun was setting, and the forest was already falling into shadow. I knew it would come. It always did. Around midnight, I heard it. A low growl, followed by the crunch of snow. The thing stepped into view, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight. It was taller than I'd realized, at least 10 feet, its body covered in matted fur. Its face was like a wolf's, but the intelligence in its eyes was unmistakable. It didn't charge this time. It stood there, watching me, its lips curling into that same grotesque smile. "You're not the first," I muttered, pulling the detonator from my pocket. "But I'll make damn sure I'm the last." I hit the button. The explosion lit up the forest, sending snow and debris flying. The cave entrance collapsed, sealing the creature inside. I waited, rifle ready, but nothing emerged from the rubble. When I finally approached, the smell was gone. The forest felt normal, as if whatever had been haunting it had vanished. But I knew better. Things like this don't just die. Not completely. I left Alaska the next day, my report classified and buried. The organization was satisfied with the outcome, but I wasn't. I've faced a lot of things in my line of work, but this was different. This wasn't just a cryptid. It was something older, something far more dangerous. And I know it's not the only one. If you're ever in the wilderness and you feel like you're being watched, trust your instincts. Because you are. And sometimes the thing watching you isn't just looking, it's hunting. The isolation of the Alaskan wilderness is a constant companion, a silent specter that tests the limits of one's endurance and resilience. It's a land where the mountains stretch into eternity, where the snow blankets the ground in an unending shroud of white, and the biting cold seeps into your bones, reminding you of your own mortality. Here, survival is not a mere challenge, it is a way of life. I am Elias Stone, a seasoned outdoorsman, born and bred in this unforgiving terrain. My entire life has been spent braving the elements, living off the land, and respecting the harsh beauty of my home. The wilderness is not just where I live, it is a part of who I am. I've learned to read the whispers of the wind, to follow the tracks of the elusive caribou, and to find warmth in the coldest of nights. Growing up, I often heard the old legends. The tales of creatures that roamed the forests and mountains, lurking just beyond the edge of the firelight. Stories of the Kushtaka, the land otter man, a shapeshifter capable of mimicking human voices to lure its victims into the wilderness. I always dismissed these tales as mere folklore, the product of vivid imaginations and the long, dark nights of winter. But recently, strange occurrences have begun to plague my quiet, isolated life. Odd tracks in the snow that lead nowhere, echoes of laughter that vanish into the wind, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. It started as a faint prickling at the back of my neck, but soon grew into a gnawing dread that I could not ignore. One cold, moonlit night, I found myself unable to sleep, the silence of the wilderness pressing down on me. I stepped out of my cabin, the icy air biting at my skin, and stared out into the dark expanse of the forest. That's when I saw it. A massive, fur-covered creature, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It stood at the edge of the tree line, watching me, and then it let out a haunting, guttural howl that sent shivers down my spine. I knew in that moment that the legends were true. The Kushtaka was real. The next day, word came from the nearby village of more mysterious disappearances. People were vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only footprints that led into the wilderness, and then abruptly stopped. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Armed with my survival instincts and deep knowledge of the land, I set out to uncover the truth. My journey took me deep into uncharted territories, places where even I had never ventured. I discovered ancient cave paintings, crude depictions of the Kushtaka that told a story of a dark curse binding the creature to the land. The deeper I delved, the more secrets I unearthed about my own lineage, secrets that tied me to the creature in ways I never imagined. My ancestors had crossed paths with the Kushtaka, and their blood ran through my veins. The Kushtaka, driven by an insatiable hunger and the need to protect its territory, soon targeted me as its next prey. Every step I took, every breath I drew, I could feel its presence, an ever-looming shadow. But I would not be its victim. Armed with my knowledge and skills, I prepared to confront the creature. The final confrontation came on another moonlit night. deep in the heart of the wilderness. The battle was fierce and desperate, a test of wills and survival. I fought with every ounce of strength and cunning I possessed, but the creature was powerful, driven by a primal rage. In the end, the Kushtaka escaped into the shadows, leaving me battered but alive. I stood there, breathless and aching, disappointment gnawing at me. The creature was still out there, a relentless predator. But this was not the end. I would not quit my battle. The wilderness had taught me to endure, to persist against all odds. And so I would continue, seeking the truth and fighting the darkness, until the day I finally broke the curse and freed my land from the shadow of the Kushtaka. We pull into a state park campground to camp for a couple of nights. There was a line of trees separating our campsite from our neighbors, and our neighbors had a strap strung up between two of the trees with two blackened sausages hanging from hooks. Trying to ignore how weird that is, our neighbors greet us and say, "Don't worry about the sausages, our buddy got a trail camera so we're trying to catch raccoons with it." Glossing over the fact that this trail cam is pointed right into our campsite. I definitely had to keep this in mind when I got out of my camper to pee in the middle of the night. The sausages were still there the next morning, but I think eventually a ranger came by and told them to cut it out because they disappeared sometime during the day. I didn't like the weird vibes emanating from that spot, so we just ignored their presence for the most part. They were gone for most of the day, but came back to their enormous RV and generator right as we were thinking it would be peacefully quiet for the rest of the evening. The last morning, I wake up to the sound of 1,000 crows circling us. I lay there for a while, and then peek out and see a dead crow lying right in the same precise spot below where those black sausages had been hanging the day before. Every crow within a 100-mile radius was circling overhead, angrily cawing out during this crow funeral. Now I've been on the wrong side of a crow war before, so I wasn't too interested in any of them recognizing me. We packed up our camp as quickly as we could and hit the road. Yes, once had a guy creeping in the woods behind our campsite. We were about 8 people, so we weren't really worried. Eventually, we called him over. He came out and was this grizzled dude that literally looked like her. Lives in the woods alone. We told him if he got us some firewood, he could hang out and drink and eat with us. No joke, dude came back 20 minutes later carrying enough wood for like a week's worth of fire. We hung out with the dude all night drinking and talking, and then we turned around and he disappeared back into the woods. Huckleberry, we will never forget you. We never got his real name, that's just what we call him to this day. Right after I graduated HS, my aunt took my cousin and I cross-country. One night we were staying at a campground near San Francisco. The tent we were in had a divider curtain, so I was on a separate side from my aunt and cousin. In the middle of the night, I heard the tent unzip and someone, who I assumed was my aunt, came into my side and got under the covers next to me. It only partially woke me up, but something felt off, and after a few minutes I looked down and noticed the person had huge boots on. It immediately became clear that this wasn't my aunt, so I got up and quickly went to the other side of the tent to wake her up. She promptly went over to wake him up and tell him that he was in the wrong tent, and he left without incident. Apparently, he had a strong odor of alcohol which I hadn't noticed. A classic case of mistaken tent ID. I go solo camping with my dog, a Springer Spaniel, so he isn't the most intimidating dog. He's just a fluffy goof that loves people. We were at the Strait State Park, and I wanted to walk to the beach from our site to see the bridge lit up at night. I go down to the beach, and we were on the sand, and I was getting ready to snap a picture. I just hear my dog snarling. He has never made a sound like that in his life, and turn to see what he is reacting to. There is a man with no reflective gear, lights or phone on him, just standing in the water about up to his knees staring at me. He doesn't say anything, just is staring. My dog is snarling, encircling me as he is attached around my waist, and I book it out of there. Go back to my site and get my gun and just hide in my pop-up. Slept very uneasy that night. Texted my folks what the hell just happened as an FYI if they don't hear from me. Went back to the beach in the morning, no person there. But there wasn't anything in the water either, like if I mistook a log for a person or something like that. My boy Papy hasn't reacted to anyone like that before, nor since then. He sometimes growls at people on the trail that spook me or weird me out, but has never made that visceral sound since then. A 25 male was camping solo at primitive wilderness site along the Linville Gorge Ridge, North Carolina. Late afternoon-ish, a guy aged 30 or so drove by, stopped, and parked at the entrance to my spot, about 40 feet from my car in sight. It was 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I was the only other person on the ridge of about 15 or so open spots. Thought it was weird, but whatever. He gets out of his car and just stands there, silent, looking the other direction for about 5 straight minutes. Never looked at me or moved. Just staring into the woods opposite of me. I was just casually sitting by my fire watching him like, ooh, is this chill, or am I about to get murdered? He finally turns around and walks right up to me. We engage in casual quick introductions, and I can see he's wanting to stay for a while. He seemed okay, but a little weird, nothing too alarming. After 10 minutes or so of convo, he says he's up here from Florida to see some waterfalls, and asks where they are. I tell him the hike to check out, and he still hangs out and keeps chatting. He's mostly making sense, but occasional nuances in his sentences were throwing me off a little. Then, he starts telling me how much he hates the cops, and how he needs to stay away from them. This was pretty weird, and although I was curious, I didn't want to know why, and didn't ask. We moved on. To make an already long story a bit shorter, we talked about his interests in random religions, wishing he could stop smoking weed, and then, he brought up the time I lost my mind. That's how he referred to whatever that moment was. And he kept saying how bad it was, how he has regrets, and just consistently would say the words, the time I lost my mind. I was pretty weirded out at this point, a bit scared to be honest, and thought it was best to just not ask, and to stay interested in his conversation, to ensure he doesn't start disliking me. He tries to get me to drink and smoke with him. I have to continue to refuse, claiming I stopped a few years ago. It's getting dark. I'm so nervous to ask him to leave, but I really want to. I didn't know how he would respond. It was clear he was a bit off. I finally politely ask if he can leave so I can enjoy a solo experience as I was hoping for. He says, Sure, of course man, of course. He walks halfway to car and says he's super tired and that he's just going to sleep in his car where it's parked blocking the entryway to my site. At this point I tell him to please go further down the mountain. I want to be entirely alone out here. He sat in his car for 20 minutes before finally leaving, at about 8-9 p.m. or so. That night I was pretty scared trying to fall asleep. He knew I was alone out there where I was, and that no one was around for at least 30 plus miles. Did this guy have bad intentions? By the end of our convo, I had such a weird vibe from this guy. I considered heading home but decided to stay. Thankfully woke up after flinching awake to every small noise I heard outside while trying to sleep. Never saw him again. This was last year, and honestly, it's a bummer because I used to love camping there. I'd been 10 plus times, but I'm truthfully pretty nervous to go back. Hopefully we'll plan another trip back out there soon, which I'm sure will be wonderful and without weirdos. On April 9th, 23, the witness said that whatever this creature was, it was pure evil. This began when a group of friends decided to go camping and hiking. On the third day of their hike, the witness said they had just started a fire and were cooking dinner when they started to hear something howling off in the distance. He and the rest of the party knew that it wasn't coyotes since these howls were deep and powerful. Maybe wolves, the witness said. Everyone turned in for the night around 10:30 p.m., knowing that it was going to be a hard hike the next day. When they were all asleep, the witness said that they all were woken by a very loud howl and movement in their camp. All 7 of the party came out of the tent at about the same time. 2 other members had brought handguns with them just in case they did run into a large animal like a bear, or as it seems, a large canine. They couldn't see anything at first, but they could hear something very large moving just out of their sight. The witness says that even though they hadn't seen the creature, he and the other members of the party could feel an evil presence. You could feel it in the air, and it was really freaking everyone out. It was a heaviness like you get when you walk in on people that are fighting, but it stops because they don't want anyone to know. A feeling of hate, he thought. Everyone else was talking and concerned about the strange feeling. They would hear large stick breaks, but still no sign of the creature. Then came another loud howl which made them jump out of their own skins. At that point, they all were starting to get scared, with his two friends having their pistols drawn and ready to fire, when one of the group members screamed out saying that she had just seen something huge, and it was only on two legs. She was visibly shaking as she was telling what she had just seen. The flashlights were really starting to go to work, shining all through the trees. Then from behind them came another loud howl which made the witness' chest vibrate, he said. Then they could hear it moving once more as if it was hunting them. One of his friends said that this is not good. Everyone needs to get close to the fire, and it needs to be built up fast. So they started placing more firewood, eventually giving off a good glow throughout their camp. Now this is when they all say that they saw this creature. The witnesses said it was standing at least 7.5 feet tall, with it having a wolf's head. It was silver with white markings while standing on just its hind legs. It was only 20 to 25 feet away from them, just staring with greenish-yellow glowing eyes, which made their blood run cold. It stood there for a good 15 to 20 seconds, just staring with its arms down by its side. It did look like it had hands, but was tipped with long claws that looked to be at least 2.5 inches. The torso was human-like through its shoulders and chest area, but its belly looked to be sunken. The legs could be seen only above the knees, with bushes covering its lower legs. The witness said that this creature is out there, but he doesn't know if it's a werewolf or what. As this creature was standing there, the witness friends had their pistols out, starting to fire at the feet of this creature, causing it to growl and show its long canine teeth. Then the creature bolted off to the left while making a howling noise once again. The sounds of the limbs and twigs breaking were fading as the creature moved off. They didn't hear the creature for the rest of the night. Regardless, after their encounter, none of the parties were going back to sleep. Before I start, sorry this will be a long one. I should just make a separate post, but I'll just leave a comment for now. I've started a post on multiple occasions, but tell myself halfway through that people would think I'm bullshitting and delete the post. My dad's side of the family is very strict religious in sort of a cult-like manner. Luckily, my dad and aunts came out kinda normal, but my grandparents are very weird. Love y'all L now. My mom's side of the family is the complete opposite. Both her and her dad have always been sensitive to paranormal shit, and both have some wild stories. My grandfather is a very wise wizard-like man with a long track record of psychedelic journeying, if you will, and I sort of relate all of our experiences to him. Anyway, here's some weird shit that has happened to us. I was born in 2004 and have had paranormal experiences throughout my life. In my first house, I mistook a woman in a dress for my older brother. When I told my parents I saw him leave, they told me he was already at school, and we were the only ones in the house. My younger brother and I would always see red firefly-like dots dance above us while we were laying in bed. Doors would slam, and there would always be noise that couldn't be explained. In 2013, we moved into a new house where my parents saw a dark, hunched raccoon-like figure on multiple occasions. There was also a motion-activated light in the hallway by my room that would go off by itself around 2-3 a.m. on multiple occasions. My sister's room was across the hall and told me that there was a time when she walked past my room and saw me sitting straight up in bed, staring right through her eyes. She said she told me to go to sleep, and I replied, "I am sleeping, can you not see that I am sleeping?" I never saw the figure that my parents did, but one of my older brother's friends saw it crawl up the stairs. F that. We moved again in 2017 into my parents' current house, and this is where we have all had the most intense experiences. First off, their house is in an older neighborhood with a lot of original owners still in their homes. Secondly, the previous owner of the house informed my dad that the next door neighbor hung himself on the back porch a few years prior. Apparently, the man had been hanging there long enough for turkey vultures to be swarming on his body and landing on the neighboring houses. When the body was found, his neck was so stretched that his feet almost reached the ground. This will come into play later. When we first moved into this house, my mom and I would talk about how clean and empty of entities this house felt. This all changed around a year or two after we moved into the house. My sister had her first daughter around this time and lived in an apartment with her boyfriend, now husband. My niece started having violent night terrors, and would always tell my sister random aspects of another life she lived with all of her old friends. One weekend, my sister came over and dropped my niece off to spend the night. While she was over, she kept telling us that all of her friends were there with us. I personally believe this entity used my niece to get into our house. Call me crazy because I just might be. Anyway, after my niece made that comment, the house never felt the same. It started out innocent and loving. There were multiple times I would feel a warm presence of my late uncle, and even felt him put his hand on my shoulder a couple times. After the good, however, there was a small leak of darkness that kept flooding the house. Shadows would move out of the corner of my eye. I would have terrifying nightmares, and always smelled a gross fishy smell in the media room. The strangest part is that for a while my mom and I would both feel cycles of good and bad in the house at the same time. I would make a comment about seeing something, and she would look me dead in the eyes, terrified, telling me she saw the same thing. One time in particular, I walked out to the garage to grab a drink, and saw a very tall, around 8 feet, slender pitch black figure looking at me behind my mom's car. When I came back and she just saw it on my face, and all she said was, "I know, they're back, I saw him too." This cycle of clean to evil kept getting stronger and more active in the house. The peak of the darkness happened right at the end of the main COVID lockdown BS. This is when it would visit me in my room at night and F with me all night long. Like clockwork, right around 2-3 a.m., I would experience a crippling feeling of terror and know that it was in the room with me. There would be a visible dark fog like haze that would fill the room like smoke. All outside sounds of bug, animals, or wind would go dead silent. My TV and phone would both disconnect from the Wi-Fi, stop working, and I would be left alone with this being. I would hear knocks moving around my room, the floor creaking like footsteps, and my blinds would get pulled and let go to hit and bounce on my windows. On one occasion, I decided to be a man and rolled over to face whatever was in my room. This is probably one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. When I rolled over, I saw a figure crouching down by my door. Frozen with fear, I kept staring and watched this figure that was even darker than a pitch black room stand up to a terrifying height and stretch its arms and neck straight up in sort of a dominating, threatening position. This thing literally reached the ceiling with the tips of its fingers and head. Around 9 feet tall. I got a pretty good look at the thing and could see it was wearing a black hat and trench coat. I told my parents about this in the morning. My mom believed me, but my dad always thought we were crazy and tried to play everything off as us experiencing sleep paralysis or just being crazy. Fast forward to 2022, my parents had some friends in town staying at the house. I came downstairs one night while they were hanging out on the couch and my dad called me over. I could tell that they were all sort of on edge, and my dad's friend described to me the same thing I saw but walking across the second floor balcony. Fast forward again to January of this year. I had a buddy over, and we both took LSD the first time. We were hanging out in the media room, where I used to get that weird fishy smell, and also the closest room in the house to the neighbor that hung himself. When we were both peeking in our own worlds listening to music, he said he opened his eyes and saw and described the exact same figure. Stretched arms and neck, hat and trench coat. The crazy thing is that he didn't bring it up until a couple months later, and I had never told him about my experience with it. The weirdest part is that he even told me that it wasn't the acid placing that vision in his head. He felt terrified, like this thing was actually looking at him. I haven't had any bad experiences in around 6 months, and actually feel really good right now. My dad, however, had an encounter with Anubis. He remembers waking up and watching Anubis walk out of his bathroom, stand at the foot of his bed, and stare him directly in the eyes. He has always been a skeptic, but after that experience he has opened up about other things that have happened in his life that he believes to be paranormal. Anyway, there's our story. Believe it or don't, but to my mom and I, it's reality. If y'all got any questions or want to know more, LMK and I'll answer. My dad says he saw La Llorona in Mexico City. I believe him because he doesn't believe in those kinds of things or isn't religious or anything like that. It was late night. They had been out somewhere and were walking to my grandma's to pick up my brother. My mom was with him, but she never saw her, even though they were walking right behind her. My dad only saw her from the back, says she had on a short white dress and long black hair. He told my mom she was crazy for being out so late, dressed like that in a rough neighborhood. My mom asked who, and my dad was saying the girl right in front of them. But my mom was never able to see her. They followed behind her a little bit along a small creek thing, and that's when she walked right into a tree and disappeared. In Ireland, where I'm from, me and my best mate were walking back from football training one night. We went past an old house that the locals say is haunted, turned the corner, and we seen a girl who looked 19 or 20 on the far side of the road. She looked pretty and was wearing a white lace dress not from this century. My mate Aaron said hello to her. She just turned her head and stared at us with black eyes for a second or two. Then she turned her head straight ahead and kept going. He looked at me, and I ran around the corner literally a second after she turned it. She was gone like a poof of smoke. We sprinted to his house, which was a kilometer away, and told his parents what happened. Scariest thing we'd ever seen. My husband and I had visited a wooded area outside of town. We were walking in the trees, and I felt a presence of an animal or something watching us. We thought maybe a fox or a bobcat. We turned around and walked out of the woods. A few nights later, we decided to hang out on the gravel road by the same woods and look at the stars on a beautiful evening. We sat on the car. We were joking and laughing and making noise. We heard a screeching sound extremely close to us. It was loud with bass to it. This was not a barn owl, fox, bobcat, or any animal either of us had ever heard. My husband had grown up in that area and never heard this sound his whole life there. It petrified me with fear. I was frozen and screamed for his help. He opened the driver's door, which was away from the woods, and we both jumped in the car. We left the area and never returned. That night haunts my dreams. I have looked all over the net and listened to hundreds of animal sounds and have never found a match. The patch of woods was small and insignificant. Small patch between fields. Whatever this was, it was brave enough to come out of the woods at us, even though we were not quiet. I never saw anything. I was too scared. My husband said he saw green eyes in the darkness. I felt like prey that was about to meet its fate. We stopped walking in any woods that summer 2 years ago. My husband was just as spooked as I was, and he had been in all the wooded areas before. We saved up money and moved out of state. We are not people who are afraid of woods or animals. We moved to the mountains of the south and have never heard anything like that night again. This is the first time I have told this story publicly. Gad, me husband, and I had visited a wooded area outside of town. We were walking in the trees and I felt a presence of an animal or something watching us. We thought maybe a fox or a bobcat. We turned around and walked out of the woods. A few nights later, we decided to hang out on the gravel road by the same woods and look at the stars on a beautiful evening. We sat on the car. We were joking and laughing and making noise. We heard a screeching sound extremely close to us. It was loud with bass to it. This was not a barn owl, fox, bobcat, or any animal either of us had ever heard. My husband had grown up in that area and never heard this sound his whole life there. It petrified me with fear. I was frozen and screamed for his help. He opened the driver's door, which was away from the woods, and we both jumped in the car. We left the area and never returned. That night haunts my dreams. I have looked all over the net and listened to hundreds of animal sounds and have never found a match. The patch of woods was small and insignificant. Small patch between fields. Whatever this was, it was brave enough to come out of the woods at us, even though we were not quiet. I never saw anything. I was too scared. My husband said he saw green eyes in the darkness. I felt like prey that was about to meet its fate. We stopped walking in any woods that summer 2 years ago. My husband was just as spooked as I was, and he had been in all the wooded areas before. We saved up money and moved out of state. We are not people who are afraid of woods or animals. We moved to the mountains of the south and have never heard anything like that night again. This is the first time I have told this story publicly. I was with a group who hiked in Forbes State Forest, Fayette County, Pennsylvania along the Quebec Run Wild area at around 1 a.m. This occurred in early September 2023. One of the members of our group let out a howl. We received an immediate response. A howl, then 3 seconds of silence, another howl, then another 3 seconds of silence. This was followed by a long howl, then about 10 seconds of silence, then one last short howl. The howls reminded me of an old firehouse horn from the town I grew up in. It was a clear code that had to have meaning. Shortly after that, we had eye shine to our right. Not far from that spot the next night, we took a dirt road to a small parking area, then hiked in on a trail that was not used much. We came across a nesting area with a few shallow footprints. There were pine trees that had been cut down by the state forest employees, and all the branches on those cut trees were literally ripped off the tree. These were 4 7-inch thick branches. There is no human that I know of that could do that. We were growled at one point. We finished by hiking the rest of the trail, which made a loop back to the parking area. We found a marker for some type of national or world hiking competition way back in the woods, which we thought was very strange. The moonlight was bright, and we all saw a Bigfoot move from one tree to another. It is a vast area, and once in those woods, it's easy to see how they could go undetected in an area not tracked by humans. I believe that the Bigfoot choose who they want to see or hear them, in my opinion. Yes, some make mistakes and expose themselves. One last thing, when we got back to our cars the second night, we had placed rocks on the hood and fender of some of the cars, and in 2 of the cars some rocks were moved. Not knocked off, but moved to other areas of the vehicle that only something or someone with thumbs could do. I live on the western slope of Colorado, and the strange thing about it is how my friend and I felt and what we individually saw. It was in late spring, and we were working on a campaign late in the evening, and we got the munchies. My friend only lives 4 blocks away from a gas station. As we were leaving the convenience store, my friend was stopped by a woman he knew growing up, and she was close friends with his mother. She was extremely intoxicated and alone, so my friend offered her a ride home to make sure she got back safely. Now here's where things got really weird. Without conversing with each other, my friend and I both felt like she was not safe to walk. I played this off as being a woman in her 60s or early 70s, intoxicated and completely alone. She claimed it was only up the block away, but it was actually a few miles outside of town. It would have easily taken her over a few hours for her to get home. Being in a small town, we have no Uber or Lyft, and taxis are pretty much triple the price at this hour. So we both felt really off that she was okay to walk that far at 1:30 in the morning. When we got down the road from her place, she asked us to drop her off away from her place so that her boyfriend wouldn't see our headlights. At this point, I didn't want to go into anything further, and there were so many red flags about the situation. I knew it was best to just drop her off as requested and go back to my friend's house. As I reversed down this single-lane dirt road, I told my friend that I was going to just pull over before we got back into town because I really needed to relieve myself, and we then both agreed that she was in a very bad situation tonight. Once I turned around this bend in the road, my headlights shined into a small group of trees and bushes. I noticed this extremely large elk-like creature lowering itself from being exposed to my headlights. I could make out the face, but it wasn't normal like an elk. Large antlers, it's coming off like dead tree branches. The front legs were inverted, skinny, and extremely long. I could tell because its hind legs and lower half were lower than its upper body. Could have been crouching or sitting though. The upper torso was huge, and I thought I saw stripes on its fur, but my friend said it looked like it was its ribcage exposed. The eyes did reflect from when the high beams exposed it in the trees, and at first, I assumed it was an elk because they're everywhere in this area. But it was extremely huge, easily over 15 feet tall but thin. I didn't immediately react to it and kept driving, but when I did see it, the conversation between my friend and I stopped as if we both saw it and trying to process it. I pulled off roughly a mile away from where I saw that. I couldn't help but keep looking down the road, making sure that creature wasn't coming after us. It was a feeling I never experienced before, and when I turned around to get back into the car, I couldn't help but notice my friend staring down the road as well, doing the exact same thing I was doing. I asked him if he saw something as well, and he said what he saw was something that looked like the forest spirit in the Studio Ghibli movie Princess Mononoke, but from hell. At this point, my fear was validated, and I jumped into the car and sped off. The feeling we both had was more than a sense of dread, and almost like we were being hunted, or if we were to investigate it at the time, our lives would have been in danger. I never in my life felt this type of fear before, and it was a new experience that I never in my life was to have. I'm glad she made it safe, and we were in the right place at the right time to give her the help she needed. After that situation, I was informed about her life of substance use and struggles, that it's actually gotten worse over the years. Ever since that night, my friend and I dealt with lots of personal things very similar. Coping with major depressions, ideation, death in the family, and just an overall rough time since that night. I struggle to claim there is some association with what we saw that night, but it's very strange how our lives got increasingly worse since. I tried doing research, but I get a lot of stories that are hard to take in as real encounters, and would love to learn more about them. This occurred about 5 years ago. I'm 20 now. My mother is a veterinarian, and we have a clinic at the edge of Rockford, Illinois. Big town, roughly 150,000. However, when I say the edge of town, I mean cornfields for 30 miles plus to the west and 5 miles to the north with intermittent forestry in that area. I went with my mother to check on an overnight dog that was recovering from extensive treatment. However, there was a small pug 15 pounds also there overnight, so I offered to take the dog out to do his business and save my mom one more chore. The back of the clinic faces a grass-covered pond or marsh. It dries up from time to time, but the grass is 3-4 feet tall. I don't remember if it was late winter, early spring, or even early fall, but no snow and the grass was tall, so my guess was early fall. The front of the clinic is next to a road and other commercial buildings. However, the back of the building, like I said, is very undeveloped. There were some leftover cookies in the clinic, so I, being a kid, grabbed one and munched on it as I waited for the pug to do his thing. I am not super fond of sweets, so I get halfway through the cookie and decide I've had enough. I remember the night having a vaguely eerie feeling. There are floodlights on the back of the clinic, though not so good lighting, and I didn't see anything and brush it off as another Midwestern night of feeling creepy. It's not uncommon. If you're from the Midwest, I'm sure you can agree, but it was quiet, more so than normal. The pond is full of sounds, frogs, and insects most of the time, but like I said, it wasn't summer or spring, so I brushed that off as well. I had lost interest in my cookie and decided I would throw it into the grass for small critters to have a good snack. So I launched this half cookie into the grass maybe 15 yards away. I don't have a great arm, and it's half a cookie, so nothing super far away. It lands in a taller thicket of grass towards the east and from the west. I hear and see something roughly the size of a deer or person take off as soon as my cookie lands, heading straight for it. I am well versed in local wildlife, and I know how deer move. But this thing moved like a person, except it was as pale as paper and had no fur at all. I can still see its spine pushing against its skin, no arch like you get with a quadrupedal animal pulling with its front legs. Instead, like an ape or person hunched. Its spine never straightened, like it was niched over, running in an inhuman way on 2 legs. All I saw was the shiny semi-reflective skin of its back, about 2 feet of it stopping at where the neck or shoulders would have started, and it had no large shoulder blades like a deer or dog or any quadruped. Instead had a narrow chest like a sighthound or deer, but bipedal with ball and socket shoulders. Not to mention, deer don't run to things you throw in the grass. They are skittish. The second that cookie landed, both me and the dog stopped cold. I have never been frozen by fear, but I was then, and we just watched it for 5 seconds as it ran from one end of the grass to my cookie, where it disappeared, and I heard it run away from me after getting or investigating the cookie. Once I couldn't hear it anymore, I immediately decided I was going back inside. The dog, however, was fixed and took a small tug of the leash to convince, but that was it. If you know small dogs, they are obnoxious and overly brave, barking at everything they don't know. But this dog never made a peep, and as soon as it realized I wanted to leave, was in complete agreement. I am not one for the paranormal or religion, but this was something I could never explain. I know deer, and this thing was no albino hairless deer. It was something else, with its emaciated body and pale white skin. I can still remember that night in perfect detail. It still raises the hair on my neck. The date was September 21st, 2022, at around noon. We were driving back from an appointment that afternoon, and I always look at hillsides and power line clearings for any kind of animal, and I have done so since I was a child. We were coming through the Laurel Ridge State Park area on Route 56 in Cambria County, Pennsylvania. near the Laurel Highland hiking trail around the trailhead. I just happened to look to the left on the embankment because something told me to look in that direction, and I saw a dark brownish figure standing in between two trees with its back facing the road, and it had to have been at least 6.5 feet tall from what I can estimate. It had one arm leaning up against the tree to the right of it, and it was hunching down to pick something up. There was a defined head on it like an ape, round towards the base and slowly went up to a dull point at the top. I instantly shouted, "Stop, we have to turn around." My mother had no clue what was going on, and I told her that I swore I just saw a Bigfoot back there in between two trees up on the hill. So we turned to sound further up the road and went back to see if I was seeing what I thought I was, or if it was an actual person. However, by the time I got back to the spot, it was gone. I'm so mad I didn't have a camera rolling, and it happened so quickly I didn't have time to even grab my phone to take a photo. After I processed what I had seen, I started feeling excited, but almost terrified at the same time, if that makes sense. When I was younger, a toy teddy bear removed itself from my shelf and launched itself across the room. It was a stuffed bear, with Guardian Angel embroidered on a circular patch on its chest, and it only had one wing, with the other torn off. My grandfather gave it to me, who I was extremely close to, but I never felt it was him who did that. I buried that memory and always told myself I made it up even though I knew I didn't. I moved into a rented home when I was in my early 20s. It was a new house, but had some strange activity. Things would go missing from right under my nose and return the next day or week or few months later. This really piqued my curiosity. After the aforementioned occurrences, I started listening to every paranormal story I could find on documentaries or podcasts. These stories really cemented my beliefs. I know that all these people aren't lying or blind or stupid. Some are cops, park rangers, experienced outdoors people with nothing to gain. Others are so distressed they can't tell their story without breaking down. I can honestly say that I don't know if there are aliens, Bigfoot, ghosts, whatever, but there certainly is something making people see these things. Possible cryptid type creature my friend and I saw on a drive tonight. Cryptids. So, me and my friend Kaz decided to go on a drive about an hour ago, because there was a spot I'd been looking at going to at night because it was secluded and a good spot to smoke in general. Around when we started talking about it, he noted that he started smelling something sweet, cherries, and a hint of cigar. I was familiar with this entity as it's been around my room since I moved in back in 2020. It's not a malevolent entity and is actually quite kind. Kaz stated that it felt like he'd been hugged and just overall felt comfort with the entity around. So we go on the drive and we're talking and all, and we turned down the last road until the destination when I saw a tree down in the road. It didn't block the road completely, but it was too narrow of a gap for my car to fit. Well, I knew a back road that led to the same destination, so we turned around and headed down that way. It was a very wooded back road. No service, very few houses for miles, and surrounded by trees. It was the type of road to only have one lane because of how unused it is. As I'm driving, we're talking, and we pass over a bridge. I pointed out as a spot I wanted to take him another time since it's just a neat area. Not long after we passed it, he said, "Did you see that?" It's a very curvy road, so I initially assumed it was an animal as I hadn't seen anything. I asked what he saw, and he said, "It looked like something that crossed the road." Immediately I got an intense feeling of dread. I asked if he felt it too, and he confirmed that he did, so I stopped the car, took a moment, and immediately said, "We're not supposed to be here." He agreed, and I turned around, heading back to where we just came. The dread got more intense, but after we crossed the bridge it eased, but was still there. I stated that whatever it was isn't allowed to follow us home, and it wasn't allowed on my property. It started to disappear, and we kept seeing things along the road like shadows. As I was driving to the main road, a white truck pulled up very fast to a stop sign on a side road, almost as if out of thin air, and pulled out behind us. I didn't take much note of it until I looked in my rear view and saw it tailing the hell out of us. I pointed it out, and Kaz said he didn't like the feeling he got from the truck. We got to the stop sign that lead out to the main road, and I purposefully didn't turn my blinker on in case it was following us. But the truck did, and it was turning the same way as us. After I made the turn, I waited a few moments before looking back in the rear view, and it was gone. It disappeared into thin air. The drive home was silent, and Kaz waited until we got back to talk about things he knew and should have thought of before we even got in the car. I was telling the story to a friend over Discord and asked Kaz to describe the thing he saw in the road, asking if it walked on 2 legs or 4. He said, "It didn't have legs. It was brown and looked like a head that just crossed the road." Asking him about it now, he said that it was tall, taller than the doorframe of my closet, and he saw it from a distance, so he didn't know what its body looked like. I asked if it could have been a bat, and he emphasized that it couldn't have been. During the drive home, we both noted that it felt like there was a hand on each of our shoulders. He pointed out the log in the road could have been a sign not to go, as well as the friendly entity that appeared in my room beforehand. I'm thinking it's a certain W-word. Entity names hold power, and I will not refer to it by name. I had seen things as a kid off and on, but I didn't remember any of it. Always stories from my mom or aunt or grandma about some creepy shit. I said to them usually these incidents had allegedly happened at one particular aunt's house, Aunt Sandy's. Around 17-year-old, I remember thinking about how they all used to tell me these stories and thinking to myself, I think I lost it, the ability to see ghosts. Then days later something happened that made me realize that it never really goes away. My aunt's house that I would see stuff at as a child was built in the 1800s Western New York area. My cousin who grew up in that house and I are very close, and in age we are 2 years apart. She was 15-year-old at the time, and we are the only 2 females out of the kids, so we are like sisters. I remember vividly, we were in her bed. She was telling me about the boy she liked, and I was listening. Her bedroom door was shut and her lights were on, and we were sitting there going about our business. While she was talking, her voice got fainter. I could still hear her rambling on, but it was muffled. I looked over at the bedroom door to my left, in the direction my cousin was sitting, and her shut door appeared open to me. Standing in the doorway was a hooded figure. I looked at it for a bit, realized that the door should be shut and not open. Shook my head literally like how they do in the movies because I was so confused by what was happening. Immediately the visual scene returned to normal, and the door appeared shut as I knew it to be. My cousin, still rambling, notices me shake my head and trying to get my bearings back and asked what was wrong. I said, "Weird. I think I just saw a ghost." We are weird and we're not scared and thought it was cool lol. Fast forward a few weeks, we are at my other aunt's house, Aunt Renee, visiting my grandparents who were staying there while they were in town from FL. My cousin and I were in a room by ourselves and talking when we could hear out in the kitchen my Aunt Sandy, cousin's mom with the haunted house, telling a ghost story. Because her ghost stories were always the best, she also didn't get scared by things. We got all excited. I said, "Ooh, sounds like ghost story time." And we ran out to the kitchen. As soon as I came into view, I said, "Aunt Sandy, are you telling ghost stories?" And she looked at me and said, "Yeah, it's a new one. Oh, you have seen him too." Like she knew this just by looking at me. I said, "Yes, the last time I was at your house." She said, "What did you see?" I told her I thought it was a monk, and that he didn't scare me, he just looked at me, and that was it. She said, "He is a monk. Our house used to have a few of them who lived there at one point. He's a nice ghost. He checks on us all throughout the night. He walks up and down the hallway. He came into my room the other night. I thought it was Uncle Hank, so when Uncle Hank finally got into bed, I yelled at him for coming in and out of the room all night and asked him what in the hell he was looking for on the dresser. He thought I was nuts and said that was the first he had been up all night. So that sold me on the whole ghost thing. But here is how I can be a little less sad when I lose someone in the physical world. Subsequent to the above ghost story, a lifetime has passed. My aunt is gone now, and when she passed I had been through a tough divorce with an abusive man and was always fighting over custody of my kids to keep them safe. Aunt Sandy left this world prematurely, but on her deathbed she said to me, "I am her goddaughter, I have a list." My cousin and I asked what she meant. She said, "I have a list of the people that I am going to haunt when I die. Mariah, my grandpa's current wife, is on it, and so is your ex-husband." I laughed because I thought it was cute that on her deathbed, she loved me so much she was plotting revenge on my behalf against my ex in the afterworld. It was funny until it happened. Then it was awesome. She passed away May 1st. August 17th, after a very dramatic and stressful week of my ex-husband trying to run away or kidnap with our kids, he just brought them to me. He told me he was giving me full custody, and I wouldn't have any trouble from him going forward. He just wanted peace. I was very confused. These comments were extremely off the wall. He sounded like he had gone completely crazy. He told me how he thought his neighbor had been trying to break into his house, and that he even thought he had a secret way into his side of the duplex. He stated that he had cameras around and proceeded to show me footage of our dog greeting someone at the garage door area. But it was slightly off, and you didn't have a full view of the door, so you couldn't see if anyone was actually there. But her body language suggested she was greeting someone. By the way, this is not a friendly dog to strangers, so not convinced she'd let a non-family member into the house. My aunt, though, she was like the dog whisperer. Animals in general loved her, even the wild ones. This apparently had been going on for a few months and was intensifying. Hearing things, the dog acting like it was engaged with someone who wasn't on camera. Despite his 12 video cameras around the house, he kept hearing things, but he never could find anyone in the house when he would look. At this point of sleep depravity, he really started to unravel, and eventually, he decided that the kids needed to be with me where they were safe, since his neighbor was after him for no apparent reason. I honestly think my aunt haunted this guy until he gave me full custody of my kids. I know she did. His neighbors were an elderly brother and sister who shared the other half of the duplex. Neither of them were able-bodied enough to perform anything exceptional, let alone do it discreetly. He surrendered the children to me, and they are both grown now and are happy and healthy. So the story when I was 17 let me know that ghosts are real. And the story from adulthood let me know that even if our bodies are gone, our energy is still so here. If you read this, thanks. When? In my case, it was more of what didn't happen that convinced me. We were half convinced already, but one Halloween after we moved into a new area, we decided to go ghost hunting. I know, tried as all hell and as stereotypical as one could possibly be. So we did the first cemetery and was spooked out and got plenty of odd photos. We did the second cemetery and was freaked out even more. We went to the third on in town, which is actually well documented as being haunted, and were super freaked out. Got a lot of odd things happening. EVP, strange shadows, stranger photos. We went to the fourth and final cemetery in town. By now, one could argue that this was all self-fulfilling prophecy kind of stuff. We did this on the stereotypical night of the year for this sort of thing. We did it at the right time of the night for maximum haunting. We were freaked at the first one, and naturally the freak out we had at that one reinforced the feelings we had as we got to the second, and the second reinforced the third. So with that, we were approaching the fourth and final one in the town. We were spooked to all hell. We approached the threshold, reinforced by 3 creepy as F incursions into the other cemeteries, nervous as hell, clutching each other's hands, and stepped into the cemetery and felt nothing. Might as well have been walking into a park. We should have been scared off out tits from the previous 3, but we felt nothing. Later research indicated that cemetery was not haunted at all. Too new, and most of the tombstones indicated lifespans of at least 65 plus years, so little to no tragedy. So to our minds, we realized that there had to be something to it, all since we felt something in the 3 that were active haunting sites, and didn't feel anything in the quiet one. That helped us believe that there was something going on. I've had a number of experiences. After my dad died, I was at work and was alone in a conference room reading material and typing. I had one of those flexible U-shaped earbud headsets around my neck. The end on each side rested about 1.5 inches below my collarbone. I was typing and felt something moving on my left side from my chest to the back of my shoulder. I patted my upper chest on the left and didn't feel the headset. The left side of it was over my shoulder. I moved it back and tried to figure out how it could have moved. I started typing again. A couple of minutes later, it happened again. There is no way that anything I was doing could cause that to happen. It takes deliberate action to move them. My dad was a prankster, so maybe he did it. Another series of events involves an antique lawyer's bookcase that I bought. I brought each of the 5 pieces into the house, dusted and assembled it, and put some small antiques in it. As soon as I left the room it was in, a cross necklace that I had worn for years and never had issues with, fell off my neck onto the floor. I checked the clasp, and it was fine. Shortly after getting it, I got a consulting gig in Arkansas for 6 months. While there, I bought some other small antiques and 1960s civil rights documents. When I got home, I dusted the cabinet and put in the new antiques. That night, the chain on my cross necklace broke. I replaced the chain and nothing happened until I interacted with it again to dust it. When I was done, I couldn't locate my phone. I looked everywhere, tried calling it from my landline, and used the Find My Phone app on my computer. Nothing. After an hour of looking, I finally stood in the center of the family room or kitchen area and said, "Please give me back my phone." At that exact moment my phone pinged. It was in the laundry room under a bunch of clothes in the hamper. I only had gone into the laundry room to get a rag and furniture polish, and I live alone. The third is after I bought an antique pre-Hoosier possum cabinet. The night after it was delivered, I had fallen asleep on the couch. I woke up to a man in Dust Bowl-era clothes standing in my living room. I screamed and he dissolved. A couple nights later, I woke to another man standing by my bedroom door. I screamed and he retreated into the wall. Over the next few weeks, I woke up to an old lady on my bed, an old lady and little girl standing beside my bed, and another couple apparitions. I bought holy water and a cross and put them on the hutch. The activity stopped until I moved. I saw people in my room a couple more times while I still had the cabinet. My son's golden retriever Rosie was staying with me one of those times. I woke to see a man standing by the door, sat up and screamed. Something was on top of me. It was Rosie, who was standing straddled over my body and was staring right where the apparition was. Night terrors? Maybe, but I've never been paralyzed, and it doesn't explain Rosie. My brother has the cabinet now. His wife refuses to let him remove the cross and holy water. I only periodically wake to heads looking at me or hands reaching for me now. I usually am able to tell myself that they won't hurt me, and I wait for them to dissolve before going back to sleep. Any thoughts about these events? I'd sure love some insight.
I was patrolling my usual forest trails at night. I've been a ranger for 8 years now, and nothing had ever scared me as much as this one experience that I encountered. Well, what I think was a Bigfoot. Doing my routine patrol on this night, it all started with me walking along the same trail I do at night to do my rounds. Being Florida, it had rained earlier in the day, so everything was calm and peaceful, minus the puddles of mud here and there. The sun had set about an hour or two before, which meant it was exceptionally dark outside. Although I was already used to this, the moon was barely out. I saw a few other rangers patrolling with me, but they had passed by, and somewhere out of nowhere, maybe about 30 minutes later, I was walking along the dirt trail when I noticed something appeared in front of me. A dark, large figure coming from the right side of the path, and then crossing in front of me as it headed off into some thick brush off to my left, palmettos. Actually, this is directly where I patrol, meaning there should most definitely not be anything even remotely close to resembling whatever this thing was. Its speed is what surprised me and took me off guard, considering it didn't even give me enough time to turn around and see what it looked like. All I could make out was that it was jet black, very tall and easily taller than I was. It moved quickly. I didn't even have time to react until laughter had already gone into the bushes, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared, deep in the palmettos. My heart sunk, and I felt an odd sensation. It was this incredible feeling of fear. All I can think about is how much more dangerous it had just made my job that night. If there was some large animal out here that moved fast, was taller than I, and larger than I, that actually crossed paths with me like it did, what else might be lurking on here? Would it cross paths with me again? Was this thing actually looking for me? As I thought about it more, I considered the fact that if something was after me, then maybe whatever it was might be prepared to attack. Although I wasn't going to back down without a fight, I began getting angry. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I was a few hours away from my shift ending, and talking myself into returning to the station, telling myself that if I did, I would be safe. If this thing is out there, it's just as much looking for me as it is anybody else. So now, more than ever, getting to my ranger station was my only priority. I didn't really know what it was or what to think about it. But there was only one way to find out, and that was by continuing my patrol. Now, I stood still for a moment, debating with myself on whether or not I should continue, remembering all the times going back home early had made me feel like a failure. Although I had never encountered anything like this before, it didn't mean there's nothing out there. It only means that whatever it was hadn't bothered me yet. But now that it had crossed paths with me, I might be next on this list of things to kill. Music that would have made me sick. The rest of my story is pretty uneventful, unfortunately. After this, not a lot happened. I didn't see the figure again, and as I look back on this event and reflect, I believe I encountered a skunk ape, a Bigfoot native to the Florida Everglades. While it was probably harmless and didn't want to actually hurt or kill me, it was still completely terrifying. I still don't know if this creature was real or not, but that didn't matter. Regardless of what it actually is, I'm convinced that whatever it was, it wanted to hurt me, or so I had convinced myself and still wonder. The brisk mountain air filled my lungs as I stepped off the charter bus and stood in front of the green forest of the Virginia Nature Park. I was here for a company retreat at an expensive cabin resort a few miles down the road. It all seemed like a bit much, but I was never one to turn down an extravagant gift. As one of the medical liaisons for the company, I was responsible for speaking with physicians about new drugs we had coming down the pipeline. I dabbled a bit in marketing as well to help bring focus to our more lucrative products, though I'm still trying to get that added to my job description with a pay increase. I wasn't very passionate about it, to be honest. I was having my first life crisis as I approached 30. The light of fluorescent bulbs was a poor substitute for the sun, and looking out the windows of my office only served to torture me with prospects of the outside world. I wondered if staying in the office all day just to fly to other offices and convince doctors to buy the same drugs with a different patent and brand name was worth it. I was usually a complete homebody, however. Once upon a time, when I was a little girl, you couldn't keep me inside. I spent the better part of my childhood and hormone-ridden teenage years exploring the woods and rivers near our house in the Pacific Northwest United States. Hell, I begged and pleaded with my parents until they allowed me to sign up for outdoor survival camps. I think it was sometime during college that a sudden bout with depression had killed that hobby of mine. The habits of staying inside on bright sunny days had entrenched itself into my leisure time. However, at the behest of my therapist, I decided to pick up hiking and running outside in nature as much as possible. I forgot how good the air felt in my lungs, and the feeling of triumph when I ran just a little bit faster for a little bit longer that day. And while hiking, I had taken to snapping pictures of wildlife with my iPhone. Even with my salary, I couldn't justify buying an expensive camera when the one in my pocket did well enough. I'll be back every 2 hours, and the last pickup is at 7 p.m. If you need a ride after that, you'll have to pay for someone from the hotel to come and get ya. The bus driver's gruff tone snapped me out of my haze. He gave me a lasting look for a moment. Make sure you mind the park rules. It's in yours and the park's best interest. I was a bit confused as he pulled off. I pushed it out of my mind and tied my braids into a short ponytail as I headed toward the visitor's center. It doubled as the command station for the park rangers and was a moderately big one-story building with large windows that ran from the side of the building facing the road to the large double doors in the front. As I entered, a welcome center greeted me to my right with an open circle of couches and a center table, surrounded by a few smaller beat-up tables and chairs, and upon a long table with a leg propped up by old magazines sat an old coffee maker with cream cups and sugar. A woman with brown skin, dark freckles, and curly brown hair shoved under a ranger's hat leaned over and grabbed a map as I approached the greeter's desk. "Hello, miss." She smiled. "I assume you're here to enjoy our wonderful nature trails and take in some sun." "Been looking forward to it, as a matter of fact." I brimmed back and looked at the town maps and photos from across the decades. I kinda always wanted to slow down and live in a small town like this. It's not a bad town, actually. We're close enough to a city to not be a dust bowl, but it's pretty quiet outside tourist season. You all got here after the summer rush. Had to kick out a few visitors for causing some property damage, and we're still looking for a couple of others." She solemnly avoided eye contact as she turned toward a sign on the wall. "Well, we only have 3 rules here at the park. Absolutely and under no circumstances are you to leave the trail. Now listen. No matter what you see or hear, do not disturb the bear carvings along the paths. If you haven't seen one in more than a quarter mile or roughly 20 minutes, or if you see any broken ones, then you turn back immediately." That was an odd way of putting it. No matter what I saw or heard, they seemed to take forest preservation very seriously here. I nodded in acknowledgement. For sure. What about photography? I've absolutely no photography once you've passed the fence post here." Her face grew stern, and she looked me directly in the eyes as she circled a marker that was about a mile from the entrance. "Also, and this is an unofficial rule, but you may have the opportunity to see black bears in the area. The same rules apply as the carvings. Leave him alone and no pictures. We can't risk having him chased off." Thanks, I guess. See you in a bit then." I folded the map and put it in my pocket. The park closes at 7:45 p.m., so that gives you some time before sunset. I would not suggest being here at night. Rangers may not be able to find you. I nodded hesitantly and left the station toward the hiking trail until I came upon a small wooden booth next to a bulletin board. I was glancing at the papers put up for the day, and quite a few were missing persons. It was always sad seeing these people. I thought maybe this is why they were so strict about the trail. Were the circumstances around the disappearances really so bad as to elicit such strict park rules? People like you end up on that board because they don't listen. I was startled by the gravelly and disgruntled voice of an older ranger, sporting a salt and pepper goatee. He had to tilt his head down slightly to look at me. "I was briefed on the way here, thanks." I responded, annoyed. "You people never listen. I do everything I can to limit how many of you outsiders come here. They should just shut this damn place down. We already don't get enough funding." He stared off into the forest. But then, I didn't like the undercurrent of superiority that dripped off his tone. "I'm fully capable of taking care of myself," I stated as I firmly pushed past him. The ranger was silent as I hastily jogged down the path. I noticed the waist-high bear carvings mentioned by the woman in the ranger station. The surrounding forest gave me chills as I made my way down the twisting trail. I couldn't argue with the park's inherent beauty that dispelled my uneasiness. I approached the first 1-mile marker and took it all in. After a few moments I looked upon a split path, the trail on the right, flat, even, and covered in footprints from visitors. The higher gradient lay to the left. Well, I do like to get a workout, I thought to myself. Plus, there was likely to be more wildlife on the path less traveled. Maybe I could sneak a few shots in. A few minutes up the path, and the sun was beginning to lift my mood despite the heat of the rays bearing down. I began to feel that all too familiar high from being outdoors again. "Well, hello there." I was startled and looked over to my right. Behind the tree line, their backs to the forest, stood a man and his wife wearing disturbingly wide smiles. He stood upright while she had her arm around his waist. Both sported matching blue tank tops. Everything below the husband's waist was obscured by foliage. They kind of looked familiar, but something was off. Like she was holding on to him to keep herself from falling. Maybe she was just tired or injured. "Nice day for it, isn't it?" he gleamed. His wife still silent beside him, her smile not faltering an inch. Yeah, it truly is a beautiful park. I haven't seen any wildlife in this area yet. I assumed there'd be quite a few here, hoping for at least a black bear." I looked further up the trail, but from the corner of my eye, I saw the man's smile twitch ever so slightly. "Aye, dear. I think they're just afraid of the trail cause of the people. Sun's really bearing down today." His wife finally spoke, but who the hell spoke like that? The sentences barely flowed together like a badly cut remix or post-mortem album. "We saw some deer just behind us when we left the trail. We can show you." The wife nodded in a gesture behind them. I took a step forward, then froze. A faint rancid smell wafted through the air, and a sense of malice, directed toward me, came from deeper in the woods. Every part of my brain screamed at me to run. That's fine. We're supposed to stay on the trail anyway, and I don't want to upset the park rangers any more than I have. Don't be ridiculous, said the man in a strained, almost staticky voice, still smiling. Shouldn't his cheeks be hurting by now? Just come on through. Can't see the good stuff if you stick to the rules. I'm fine, really. Maybe I'll see something up ahead, but I need to keep my heart rate going. Good lie, Nina, really using those sales tactics. I do deserve a raise. The man's smile twitched again. Okay, he said slowly. Without another word, he and his wife took off deeper into the woods. The gait of their walk was weird too, as if they were tied together in a three-legged race. Maybe she sprained her ankle, but by the time I thought to call after them, they were gone. I continued up the trail for another 20 minutes, and the trees had receded a bit, giving room for nice grassy areas to relax in. As I thought to cross the threshold kept by the wooden bear beside the trail, I heard a strange noise. Was that something whimpering? I looked to the other side of the trail, and lo and behold, a foot behind the other bear carving was a red fox laying on its side, one of its back legs completely twisted around. Oh no, you poor thing. What happened? The fox looked at me with vaguely human eyes and continued to whimper and pull itself toward the woods. The poor thing was so scared. It whimpered and barked and yipped. Chirp, chirp, and chirped to pull at my hearts dry. Wait. It sounded like a child doing their best impression, but I know I heard it. I stopped just before I was fully in the grassy patch, my back foot still in line with the bear carving. The fox froze and stared at me from the corner of its eye. As I started to back away, it turned toward me with a horrifying scowl. It rolled over onto its belly and slithered, crawled away. Its limbs moved, but slightly out of sync with one another. Its broken leg no longer an issue. Now that I think about it, it was more like a puppeteer trying to mimic walking while dragging it deeper into the woods. Crunch, snap, crunch. The distinctive sound of footsteps making their way through the forest. Was it the couple from earlier? I thought they had gone a different direction into the woods. Were they following me? I took off into a jog, but as I continued to hear the footsteps around me, I began to run. The sound of snapped branches and broken leaves came closer and closer. I began to sprint, but no matter how fast I ran, the footsteps were right behind me. It must be them. The timing matched that weird walk I noticed before, but how would they be able to keep up with me like this? Fancy seeing you again. I pressed on the balls of my feet, stopping so hard I nearly fell over. The rancid smell began to fill my nostrils. In the trees right before the left path in a fork in the road, leaning a hand on a broken bear carving, was the couple, their front unobscured. It was like someone had shoved the bottom half of the wife through the husband's torso and melded them together. She hung forward on her husband's left side and held herself upright on the broken bear carving. 3 legs supported them, the center a peg of twisted and gnarled flesh broken off at the ankle. Something had clearly misunderstood the architecture of the human body. We didn't think we'd catch up to ya, joked out the wife. We thought we might. I heard someone call. I'm so cold, it hurts, and wanted to make sure you was all right. Safe, dear. It's just not safe. Keep running safe in the forest. The husband stuttered out, once again mimicking random lines from a tape recorder. The smell grew stronger, and I could feel that menacing presence on the trails to my left and right. It was all an encompassing and suffocating darkness that corrupted the soil, the animals, and the very air itself. I needed to get away. I needed to run to the only place I couldn't feel a sense of dread, and before I knew it, I had taken off straight down the middle of the fork into the woods. Faster and faster I ran, hearing the clumsy clambering of the coupled monstrosity behind me. I felt the cutting air of hands that barely missed the nape of my neck as I ran. I attempted to cut perpendicular to the straight path I had been running, hoping I would run into another path again. The footsteps behind me began to grow distant, and my lungs were on fire. I ducked behind a large rock and tree, trying to quiet my exasperated breaths. "Are you okay, miss?" An echoey voice called out ahead of me. A man stood in a ranger's uniform, his head hidden underneath his hat. "Come here, miss. Away from the forest. Not safe." I didn't notice the jerky extension of his hand as he beckoned me toward him. Neither did I notice the return of the rancid smell that had stalked me earlier. I just wanted so badly to believe I was safe. I started to stand up and walk toward him, but he lifted his head, and all that was there was a shifting dark void of tendrils inside a cavity where the man's face had once been. "Watch out, ma'am. Get back." Gunshots rang out from the void. Still, hungry, bored. With this one, you are desired. A croaky whisper emanated through my head. I fell back into a sitting position and held my head in my hands. The entity stepped toward me with an abysmal purpose, its hand extended, jerking back and forth at the wrist. Darkness enclosed around me and my vision blurred. Everything was getting so cold. There was a deep roar in the distance, an intimidating and hungry roar that grew louder as it approached. Oh God, what the hell is going to happen now, I thought. I must be in the maw of the beast, my insides soon to be devoured. I'll just be a hollow husk. But then nothing happened. I sat for a few seconds as a roar sped past me and a wet nose sniffed at my face. I opened my eyes to a black bear, large and drooling, inhaling me deeply before chuffing and chasing off after two other bears further into the woods. I forced myself up, my legs still a bit stiff with fear, and tried my best to orient myself back the way I came. I quickly built up to a run, following the specks of orange sunlight that grew more frequent the further I went. I might be closing back onto the trail I ran from earlier, and relief began to wash over my body. "Hey friend, fancy seeing you again. Hey, you stalking us?" To my left, effortlessly galloping along, was the couple. Dark tendrils had burst through every orifice in their face, snaking and grasping at the air. Their faces were still twisted into smiles that now hung loosely from broken jaws. The wife bobbed to and fro, grabbing nearby trees to pull themselves closer to me. They started to scream in agony, begging for mercy, their last words played back at wildly varying tempos. I began to see the trail again and the distinct outline of a wooden bear. I could do this, I told myself. Just run a little faster, just a little faster, just... Jump, thwack. I landed hard. I looked forward to my fingers that fell just short of the trail. Then there was the sound of a person being tackled, followed by a vicious roar. A few feet from me, an old scar-ridden bear had put all his weight on the couple. The flayed trees to the side of me indicated he had charged in perpendicular to us. Two adolescent black bears had their jaws around the couple's neck and face. One bit down, cracking the face and skull like an egg, and began tearing at the dark tendrils inside. The other tore their head off entirely and tore at the darkness like crab legs. They were eating them. The old bear sniffed in my direction, inhaling deeply as the bear deeper in the woods had. Disappointed, he turned his attention back to their kill and began to work his way through the torso. I thanked every god and spirit for the hungry animal that saved me. The sun was setting by the time I had emerged, and night had blanketed the sky as the ranger booth came into view almost an hour later. The park ranger I met on the way in stood with three others, including the head ranger who accosted me earlier at the notice board. Prick, son of a bitch, there she is. The old ranger walked briskly over to me. The young ranger from inside the station had her shotgun raised. "Put that damn thing down, Rita. If that thing was inside her, she wouldn't have made it past the carvings." He glanced over to the wooded area that snaked with the path behind me. "Besides, she ain't gibbering at us from a meat suit. Shell, actually. They're more like hard shells." I huffed out as we passed the notice board, and I saw the familiar missing photos of a middle-aged couple in matching blue tank tops. Beside them was the photo of a young park ranger, leaning on a wooden bear and smiling. Once inside the station, they sat me down on a couch and brought out a blanket before giving me a bowl of leftover chili from upstairs and a Gatorade. I poked around at the chili in between small bites. My mind was still trying to wrap itself around the events of the day. The head park ranger sat next to me, his hat in his hands, the thinning hair on his head turning gray. I lost my protege to that thing. Kid had his whole life in front of him, and he wouldn't listen to reason. He knew. He just knew that he had heard them call in from the woods. He sat up a little bit straighter. He never believed me much, and that's fair. Most people here don't believe until they see a deer standing upright, a bird bobbing up and down in the sky like a goddamn cartoon reel, but goddamn it. He choked back tears and rubbed his temple. Nobody was ever stupid enough to actually go in on their own. You could just feel something was wrong, but you. He pointed at me. You've seen it, you've survived its tricks, and you didn't do anything to hurt it, but you goddamn survived it. He rose to his feet and put his ranger hat back on. I stared out the window for a moment, still in shock of what happened, but the sheriff's point about survival struck a chord in me. I learned a lot today about how parks work, and I suspect you might have an opening. The old ranger looked at me quizzically before a slight smile crossed his face. The position wouldn't be super fancy, but I imagine it would allow someone to slow down a bit if they were interested. Help us get what we need to keep the people safe and certain wildlife confined. And that's it. That's how I came to live my small town dreams as a park ranger in Virginia. I took over marketing, and after a couple of rangers said they'd started seeing more cubs further up the trail, I've pushed the idea of us being a black bear sanctuary. As such, the public was encouraged to stay on the trail for a clear and conscious reason instead of a vague horror movie warning. We've raised a lot more money this way as well. We repaired the broken bear carvings on the trail I was on just a couple years earlier. We have no idea who made them or where they come from, but we've tried recreating them with varying results. It's just a hunch, but I think that thing can't tell the difference between a fake one and a real one if it's carved just right. The current world situation has really given us the time to get our ducks in a row and shore up any safety holes as people were stuck at home. However, our state has declared that it is opening up again soon and people are antsy. This town saw its fair share of tourism before, but other parks in the U.S. have reported waves of visitors in numbers they haven't seen in a while. People are holding their families and friends anywhere that isn't home, and this is a problem. We are going to lose people, but I don't believe that number has to be significant. So why did I tell you all of this? Is it to warn you against going to national parks? No, I fully believe you should patronize them as much as possible. We need the funds. But I am saying that the world out there holds horrors you couldn't imagine. Hell, from what I've heard from rangers at other parks, everyone has their own problems they have to handle, all unique in their own way. So please, come out and enjoy yourselves. Just abide by park rules. Oh yay, and please stop by the gift shop on your way out. All proceeds go to the park's Office of Operations, and donations are always welcome. Ask for Nina in Marketing and Project Management for more details on how you can help. My brother and his friends were on the highway one night. It was Highway 73 South in Quebec, Canada, and basically my brother saw what looked like a tall, white pale humanoid near the woods on the side of the road. He also said it was abnormally tall and walking on two legs. At first he didn't think much of it, thinking he was the only one who saw it, and he believed he might have been seeing things due to his tiredness. Until one of his friends who was driving screamed, "WTF was that?" All four of them saw it. They all described the same thing. I believe it might have been a skinwalker. Thoughts? Chief Petty Officer Marcus Kane had seen it all during his years as a Navy SEAL. He had faced enemy combatants in the most treacherous of terrains, overcome the odds in countless missions, and earned a reputation as a fearless and unflinching leader. Yet, nothing could have prepared him for what he and his team were about to encounter deep within the remote coastal regions of Iraq. Tasked with a classified mission to gather intelligence on an extremist group that had been causing havoc in the region, Kane's team prepared to deploy under the cover of darkness. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the jungle as they began their infiltration. The team moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each member relying on their training and instincts to navigate the hostile terrain. As the mission unfolded, however, strange occurrences began to unsettle the team. Bizarre symbols etched into the trees seemed to appear out of nowhere, sending a shiver down the spines of the seals. Whispers, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the night air, filling their ears with an unsettling presence that defied explanation. Equipment that had always been reliable suddenly malfunctioned without reason, adding to the growing sense of unease. Kane's experience and leadership were put to the test as tensions rose within the team. He knew that maintaining cohesion was vital, but the psychological toll of the inexplicable events was taking its toll on even the most seasoned warriors. Late one night, as the team huddled around a dimly lit fire, Kane could see the fear in their eyes. He knew he had to find a way to restore their confidence and address the growing uncertainty that was eroding their trust in their own senses. Then came the encounter that would change everything. It was during a routine patrol that one of the SEALs managed to capture shaky footage of a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. The footage showed a face covered in brown fur, with a mouth that was barely discernible from the distance of the camera. The creature's head bore the unmistakable dome shape and sloping forehead associated with gorillas. It was as if a Bigfoot creature had come to life before their eyes. Fear turned into a collective determination. The SEALs shifted from being the hunted to becoming the hunters. They knew they couldn't allow this unknown predator to continue plaguing their mission and sowing terror among their ranks. Armed with their training, experience, and a newfound sense of purpose, the team embarked on a relentless pursuit of the creature. The pursuit led them deeper into the heart of the jungle, where the line between reality and the supernatural seemed to blur. Kane found himself grappling with skepticism and a sense of awe as the evidence of the creature's existence mounted. The symbols, the whispers, and the encounters all pointed to a reality that challenged his understanding of the world. With each step, the tension grew. The juxtaposition of elite warriors facing an enigmatic and potentially supernatural foe created a gripping sense of urgency. As the team closed in on the creature's lair, the final confrontation became inevitable. In a climactic battle that tested their limits, the SEALs faced off against the creature. Bullets and adrenaline flowed in equal measure as they fought to overcome an adversary that defied rational explanation. Kane's leadership, tempered by years of experience and his newfound openness to the unknown, guided the team through the perilous encounter. When the battle was over, the creature lay defeated, its existence now an unsettling memory. As the team regrouped and made their way back to safety, they carried with them a story that defied easy explanation. They had faced the inexplicable, navigated the horrors of the unknown, and emerged victorious not only as warriors, but as witnesses to a truth that expanded their understanding of the world.
Back when I was like 6 or maybe 30 years ago, I was an unknown predator as a child. Lived in a trailer park, so during the summer, it was literally Lord of the Flies from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. One day, while me and a friend were snooping around people's yards, we found a rowboat behind a shed. The thing was rotted, falling apart, and just not fit for use. But my friend got all excited and said he knew where a lake was we could go sailing at. So we grabbed some skateboards and 2x4s for oars and proceeded to stead the boat. It took 4 hours of dragging it, and another 2 hours of moving it through swamp and forest. But we get to the lake my friend was talking about. To us it was a lake, but really just a pond. We're excited about a job well done and just throw everything into the boat and start rowing out with the 2x4s. We get out to the middle of the pond and we started to realize we're taking on water. Lots of water and fast. We start to panic because we can't scoop out water faster. Then it's leaking in when suddenly we hear a hollow dum and scratching sound. The boat was sitting on something and we were no longer sinking but still taking on water. We take off our shirts, socks, and stuff them into spots. We could see water leaking in and finally relax. We can get water out faster than it was coming in. It was then we had a chance to take in the surroundings. It was pretty awesome for a 6-year-old, and we're talking about 6-year-old stuff for a few minutes. And then I looked down into the water. It was really clear and seemed deep. And then I realized what I could see and what we were stuck on. In the pond we could see hundreds of 50-gallon metal barrels. They were piled up so high in some places the boat had gotten stuck on one of them. It was like looking into an alien world with mountains of barrels everywhere. I think I had just seen Return of the Living Dead, which starts with kids opening a 50-gallon barrel and releasing the undead. I think so. I was freaking out and tell my friend we need to get out fast. So we're panicking and getting water out of the boat, and then my friend screams and points down the road, and we both see something worse than undead zombies. The trailer park manager in his truck flying down a dirt road near the pond and coming right for us. Now it might not sound like much, but this was the guy who got you in serious trouble. Trailer park parents generally didn't care what the kids did, but when he shows up to your house to threaten your parents with being kicked out because of what your kid did, you knew you were in for a memorable beating. He pulled up near the pond and were trying to row away from him, but we were starting to sink again. He grabbed a rope and threw it out to us and pulled us in. We were terrified. We knew we were in for some serious screaming from him and beating from our parents. But he didn't scream, didn't threaten. He just stood there staring at us. He asked us what the hell we were doing out there, that we were trespassing, stealing, and what we were doing was wrong. But not screaming. He was calm, kind of scared, like we got him in trouble. We explained what we were doing there, but didn't bring up seeing the barrels. He questioned us forever. We were 6, and then told us he wouldn't tell our parents, which was crazy because he told parents everything he saw and would bring us home if we agreed to never go out there again, and to not tell our parents, otherwise he would tell them about all the crimes we committed. He dropped us off back in the park, and we never heard anything about it again. One thing that did change was he never was mean to the two of us again, but was a bastard to every other kid. He never told our parents about anything we did wrong, and was never mean or threatening to myself or my friend again. My uncle saw a skinwalker. So as I said, this happened to my uncle when he was about my age. I'd say early 20s, maybe 18 or 19. Must have been the 70s in that case. He was out in the Wyoming wilderness tending to a ranch house. Just him and his girlfriend. The owner was out and had him go up to take care of the animals until he came back. A few days in and everything was well. Animals well, uncle well. He decides to retire for the night. Goes in the cabin with his girlfriend. Sun goes down, they pass out. Uncle wakes up to the pitch black and this horrific hypnagogic scream. It was one of those things, he later recalls, that he hoped he had only dreamed. So he lays there for a bit. Things seem okay. Girlfriend doesn't stir. Tries to drift back off. But before he can, another one comes. This time undeniably real. Girlfriend wakes and the dogs started barking. My uncle gets up and grabs the shotgun. Heads for the door, but realizes the scream isn't alone this time. Another voice chimes in. Then another, to eventually form what he would later describe as a little chorus of suffering. He starts to back away slowly from the door, and that's when the chanting started. Listening to him tell the story, you'd almost start laughing at this point, unless you were really looking on him, because he was dead serious and full of all those little micro expressions that happen as you really recall something. He could hear their footsteps creak up and down the small wooden porch of the cabin. The chanting from multiple voices, multiple footsteps. By this time, him and his girlfriend are in a shadow in the corner of the cabin, away from the windows and the light of the fireplace, shotgun leveled at the door. He says it felt like forever, animals screaming, them chanting, him shaking, girlfriend crying. In hindsight, it must have only been 30 minutes or so. Then it all stopped. Not all at once, though. One by one, the barking stopped. One by one, the screams stopped, until the last one, with which the footsteps and chanting came to an end. My uncle sat huddled in the corner, though, for several hours. Eventually, the sky started to brighten with that morning blue against the silhouette of the pines. He waited a while longer, until the sun crept over the mountain range, before making his way to the window. He had an idea of what he'd see. He'd hunted big game and small game, but this was different. The porch was empty, but the cabin ground weren't. He peeked his shotgun out the front door, slowly opened it. There in the morning sun, a nice cool morning, he recalls, birds chirping, air fresh. The ground was strewn with dead animals. Blood everywhere. Everything dead and dissected. Guts and organs strewn about. He puked right there on the porch when the smell hit him. Regaining his composure, he made his way around the animals. An odd detail, he thought in retrospect, were the rubber bands tied around the testicles of some of them. He'd seen enough. Him and his girlfriend noped the F out. They made it to town, called the police and the owner. Not sure what came of it. He gets visibly shaken to this day just when it's mentioned. He says he thinks it was those skinwalkers, but he's a superstitious backwoods hick more or less. I live in Portland, Oregon, but I work at Mount Rainier National Park as a backcountry ranger. I would like to remain anonymous, so please refrain from including my name. On the night of the 5th of September 2015, I was driving home from work after a busy day of trail maintenance on the Ara Loop. I was about 15 miles east of Paradise at about 1:30 a.m., and I was doing about 50 miles per hour. I was driving on the Lewis River Road. It was a beautiful night, and I was enjoying the drive. I had my headlights on high beam and was watching my mirrors to avoid deer, as they frequent this area, and in the past I've nearly totaled my car in the winter when a large buck jumped out. As I rendered the corner coming out of the forest, I noticed a large dark figure on the side of the road. Now immediately I'm on edge because in my mind, I'm imagining this being a large buck about to jump out from my car, and I could not afford the time to make another car payment. I immediately slam on my brakes because I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I realized it was not a deer because this thing was standing beside a tree on the road shoulder. So I slowed down even more. I began to focus what little eyesight I had on this creature, and I could see that it was very, very large, probably about 8 feet tall, covered in shaggy long hair that looked very thick and matted. It was hard to tell in the lighting conditions and shadows any real details of the face, but I could tell that it turned to look at me directly, and then stopped and stepped off the road into the field. It was obviously aware of my presence and did not seem surprised by me. They continued to walk away from the road into the field, lumbering on 2 legs. I'm telling you now it was not a bear because it never walked like one. It reminded me of a person on 2 legs the entire time, the comfortability of bipedally walking. It walked for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, before I could not see it anymore. I was in shock, to say the least. I drove very slowly for a minute to see if maybe I could see it again, but I eventually lost sight of it. Even though I was in shock, I did not feel too scared. I did not feel threatened. I was just in total awe at what I just saw. It was so huge and very obviously not a bear or a person in a suit. Why would somebody be out here in the middle of nowhere? It also walked very naturally on 2 legs. I went back to the spot the next day and measured a tree it was standing beside. That's how I know it was around 8.5 feet tall. I've been a park ranger for the better half of 8 years now and have never seen anything like this before in my life. I have had other interesting experiences though in the backcountry, but they were mostly while working and related to the environment. People are always throwing around the term Bigfoot, but I have no idea what this was. I'm ignorant, please excuse me, and thank you for your time. If you can provide any information, that would be most helpful. Thank you again. May of 1985, we were dispatched to a rural area of Placer County, California, investigating some possible dog or livestock killings. The crime was that the owners found their dogs dead in the backyard, and one of their goats was taken from the pen and killed, pulled apart like a piece of chicken. What was strange about this is that any animal abducting goats or hens would generally eat on them, not take their prey and pull them apart and leave the body. When we got there at first we saw nothing, but when we began to walk around by our cars, we could hear something breathing pretty heavily, like it was running and getting closer. So we walked around some more and could see what looked like a little person hiding behind two trees, just about 50 yards out, looking at us. My partner actually recognized it at first, that it looked like a human face or maybe a child, but with glowing eyes, crouching down and covered in hair. Then it crouched down all fours and ran away into another tree. I was already shooting at it with my 9mm. It did not move like a human, but like that of an animal. That is when it came out of the tree and was on top of me. The rest of the incident is kind of blurry. However, I do know that nobody could find the bullet casings or even see what I had been firing my weapon. I then took them to where the creature was standing when it ran across the road. They still could find nothing. The people who worked on the case were stunned by what happened. One man said he would later go back there again if need be. He also claimed that he had been feeling something evil in the area for a while now. Take that as far as you want. Later on down the road, we also found some dead cattle in another part of the county. We were told by the owner that he had been having problems with some cattle mutilations and thought that this something that I had shot at was also killing his livestock. I know it was not the same thing because the killings were different. Another man who we spoke to had said that this goat that was killed had its stomach completely ripped open just like the others, left there to rot. My report and statement were only taken so far. With this creature having jumped on top of me, I'm surprised it did not kill me, but it did give me some pretty severe trauma that I have to live with. I can tell you that whatever this thing was, it was not a normal human or an animal. This was something else altogether, maybe an unknown species of some kind, something that science probably will deny. I've had a few paranormal experiences throughout my life, but the strangest and most unbelievable was what I know I used to see as a teenager. A gnome. It wouldn't have even been as tall as my knee, probably halfway up my shin. It had a red hat and a white beard. He was a typical garden gnome, only he wasn't a statue. I saw him at least a dozen times through our living room window, frolicking about in the garden and along the windowsill outside. I'd sometimes even see his silhouette through the blinds if they were closed on a sunny day. My parents, obviously, always brushed it off as silly crap kids say when I told them what I saw. "Oh, don't be silly," or "Oh, what did you?" They never paid it any attention, and why would they? I even remember my father saying something to Mum like, "We don't even have a garden gnome," and she responded that it was just an active imagination. I lived there until I was about 18 or 19, and I don't even think anyone in our street owned garden gnomes at all. It never even once looked at me, like he didn't know I was watching, or perhaps didn't care. The last time I saw him was about 20 years ago. I've never spoken about it to anyone but my mother and sister during my adult life, else I'd probably be admitted to a mental health ward. When I asked Mum, she still remembers me talking about him when I was little. Most people reading will probably think what a load, but I promise this is true. Was he real? Or possibly a fabricated memory of some kind? Why would my mind make me remember fake stuff? Has anyone else ever seen one? This happened in the western suburbs of Sydney, Australia. I spend a lot of time in Africa both on business and for pleasure. One time there were about 8 of us that went camping in a national park in Zambia. I was with a friend and the other 6 I did not know. There were 2 other couples and 2 single females. We spent the afternoon getting to know each other and pitching our tents, had our dinner and retired to our tents for sleep. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, I hear the 2 females freaking out. There was screaming like I have never heard before. To be honest, I was shitting myself. I thought some animal was attacking them. My adrenaline was pumping like crazy. I always remember hearing that when people are screaming they are okay. It's generally the quiet ones that you should worry about. So I got my torch and found the courage to open up my tent. At this point the screaming was continuing, and I could now hear scratching noises. The other members of the group were remaining very quiet. I am sure they were just dry-mouthed and did not want to bring attention to their tents. I slowly opened the tent and shone the torch in the direction of the girl's tent, and I saw 2 hyenas walking around the tent. I know that generally hyenas are generally timid creatures around humans, but they have been known to attack and kill people in rare circumstances. By this time, the guide was out of his tent and simply shouted at the hyenas, and they ran off. One of the golden rules of camping in the domain of wild animals is not to keep any food around. Always keep food in sealed containers and make sure everything is clean and washed properly. It turned out that one of the girls has some biltong dried meat in the tent, and the hyenas has smelt it and were trying to get at it. This happened quite a time ago, but remember the encounter very well. My mom sent me next door to my grandma's to get something for her, when the whole time felt like I was being watched, and looked over my shoulder several times. Now the distance between my house and my grandma's was long enough, where once I reached my grandma's, my home was not visible. The sighting occurred on my way back home. I was about halfway when I saw the creature. It was making a lot of noise and came crashing out of the tree line, breaking a huge tree branch. Then it began to run toward me. I remember thinking, this can't be happening. I felt like my legs would not move out of fear. It all was in a time span of 5 to 10 seconds. I then ran the rest of the way home, and I tell you, I have never ran so fast. The next day I took my mom to the site where the creature had come out of the trees and showed her the tree branch. Lots of people I know do not believe in Bigfoot, so I normally would shy away from telling my story. I do know for a fact that what I saw was indeed Bigfoot. Okay, so I'll try to make this relatively short, so I'm not one for believing too much of cryptid lore. Never had an encounter before or anything like that. But my partner and I live on the border of upstate New York, not far from the Whitehall Bigfoot area. One night, partner was taking out the garbage and came back inside startled. I mean, really shook up. They said they had seen a creature that looked like maybe a fox or coyote, but that it then stood up on its hind legs, and so they booked it back inside. Fast forward about a month, and I'm outside on my porch smoking a cigarette, enjoying the stars under a crystal clear sky. We have a small plot next to our house that has a tow-behind landscaping trailer permanently parked on it about 20-ish feet away from the house. After a while of standing outside, I get the sudden and intense feeling like something is watching me. Just that primal feeling of danger. It should be noted that, like most people up here, I'm usually carrying a gun on me. Coyotes and bears are fairly common up here, so I kind of do the four corners check of my surroundings. When I looked over to that trailer, I saw there was something the size of a large dog laying in the grass. Mind you, it's a clear night with a not quite full moon, and the grass was uncut long, but not like a meadow. If I had to estimate, I'd say 7-9 inches high. So I had a really good view of this thing. Now I know never to approach a random animal bedded down at night, so I just kind of watch it for a second. Even in the light of the moon, its outline and coat were pitch black. Blacker than anything I've seen before, unnaturally contrasting against the ground it laid on. Then it looks up, it has piercing red eyes. I'm thinking, aw, what the F, and put my hand on my revolver. I ain't about to be coyote food. And then, it stood up. It stood up on its hind legs. The only way I can describe the legs of it is like that goat-human hybrid from the Narnia movie, but with the torso like a hybrid of man and canine. It was taller than me, and I'm 6'1". It didn't even need to take a step. I flicked whatever was left of my cigarette and backed away to the door, locked and bolted it, and spent the rest of the night wondering what I just saw. Now I'll admit I'm a religious man, but that thing didn't fit the description of any jinn I've heard of. It's to this day one of the few things in my life I cannot explain. We've installed security cameras since, but now the lot is under construction, and we haven't seen it since. I don't know what I saw that night truly, but I intend to find out one way or another. I want to go into the forest near the plot and look for signs. Does anyone have any advice on hunting this sort of cryptid? I'll update with any further happenings should they appear again. Me and like 10 of my friends went to an abandoned mental hospital in Detroit. We just stood way back and threw rocks at it for a while while one of us worked up the courage to actually go inside. We constantly are seeing things move in the windows of the building and small lights moving and turning on and off, but eventually half of us say F it and find the safest way in. We go through where the trucks used to unload into the building and walk down the long hallway. There's a stairwell nearby where we walked in, and I heard voices in the stairwell, and no one else heard it but me and my best friend, so we kept moving. We take a couple more turns, stopping occasionally because someone heard something, when soon we come across the most dreaded place we could have found, the morgue cremation room. Tons of graffiti everywhere saying stupid teenager scare tactic shit. Everyone shit themselves when we found that room, but we all chilled in it for a while until we inevitably started to leave. As we leave the morgue, it takes you into a hallway where the elevator shafts are, and there is a room across from the door. We exit, and me and my friend are walking out first, when suddenly a girl in a white nightgown steps out from the door across hall, and I shit myself. Hoping to cut the silence and maybe get her to react because I was thinking she was like a crazy homeless crack addict, I yelled, "Oh shit," and she just stood there. Soon after, another guy comes out, then another guy, then another girl whose looks made me think they were actually doing heroin. Collectively, we all just went, "What the F," and started talking. They told us to put our weapons down because cops go in there all the time, and you're not supposed to be on the property, let alone with weapons. But we just had like scrap metal from the ground. So we put our weapons down and talked to the other group for a second while I was talking to the nightgown girl. And the ringleader, I noticed the cracked out looking one just walk away into the pitch blackness of the corridor behind her. While we all had flashlights, which the kid told us to put those off too. But F that idea. We leave, and as we get on the road back to our cars, surprise, surprise, a cop pulls into the road, and we all hid at that point. It was just a couple of us, and some were farther ahead and had made it back to their cars while the cop searched the area with his spotlight. That was a crazy or creepy night. Oh, and later that night at like 5 a.m. a dude followed me in his truck, cause me and my friends fell asleep in my car across the street from his driveway. So he just shined his brights into my car for like 10 minutes, while we tripped out to see if he was gonna do anything. Plus, we were high and tired, thus very confused. Once I had stopped at a gas station and got out, they pulled up to the pump behind me and just stayed in their truck. I walked inside to pay for gas, came back out to talk to the truck guys, but they left as I was walking out. My master's degree work was looking at stoneflies in coastal Alabama, and it required a lot sampling out in the streams, the habitat for juvenile stoneflies around Mobile Bay. When I went sampling, I'd have to get into the stream and collect 5 packets of leaves that collected in the stream at random intervals in a 100-meter stretch of the stream. I sampled from June 2012 through July 2013 for 2 different projects, one that used the same 4 streams for an entire year, and another project that used about 20 different streams in the fall and spring season. When I went sampling, I parked an old Ford Econoline van with a big university sticker on it by the side of the road, near a bridge, then climb down and hop in the stream and go to work. With these streams being out in the woods and some of them being damn remote, creepy stuff happened every so often, from metal scrappers asking for any good finds, a decrepit old baby doll in the woods, walking up on a dog grave site under a bridge, a truck stopping on the bridge of a 30-meter wide river, terrible place to sample for my work by the way, and watching me and my sampling partner from a distance, and so many other things. I could keep going on, but this is the time I truly felt I was going to die. At the beginning of my field work in the summer, it was easy to coordinate with lab mates to get a sampling partner to make the work easier and safer, but late in the fall to the 12th semester, my main sampling partner had finished her thesis and didn't come to campus much. Can't blame her. So I started sampling by myself in later November or early December. It added some extra time onto my day, but it made scheduling easier and more consistent, and nothing dangerous had happened going solo, so I was good with the change. It was the early spring of 2013, and I was traveling to the second stream of the day, hitting a stream I'd seen twice a month for the last 7 or 8 months. I knew it like the back of my hand and thought I'd seen everything it had to offer. I rolled up about 10 a.m., munching on an apple I had started when I left the previous stream, and tossed the apple core into the clearing that I had parked the van in. This stream had a nice clearing off the side of the road, but was a 30-meter or so walk to the stream with a slight decline over eroded dirt and gravel, so I couldn't see the other side of the stream. I blissfully rolled up my trusty, punctured chest waders and walked to the trunk, packed up my gear, grabbed my subber sampler, a fine mesh net that attaches to a folding base and metal meter stick. I casually strolled down to the stream, ready to take my usual piss under the bridge, as I do at every stream when across the stream I see a dog. I think it is a border collie German shepherd mix, but I am not that great with dog breeds. I stop in my tracks, staring at it, waiting to see if its owner will show up from the woods, but mostly debating if I could still piss, but the dog takes the first move. It makes a loud solitary bark and then runs off into the woods downstream. It promptly returns, but it isn't alone. There is another identical dog with it. They don't make any noise. They just stand attentively on the other side of stream, staring at me. I can't make out any collars around their neck, but they had a lot of fur. There is about 20 meters separating us, since neither of us are that close to the stream bank. The stream bank is relatively high from the water, about 2-3 meters where the standoff happened, and I was on the side with a small steep entrance, so I figured I could get my work done and the dogs would leave me alone. As I'm climbing down, they are mirroring my distance into the stream, but not getting closer to the edge of the stream. I check over my shoulder to still see them watching me from the clearing, and still think I'm fine, so I start walking upstream. The dogs keep following me, but now they enter the forest. These dogs were not frolicking around the woods. They hunched down, hid behind trees and foliage to conceal themselves, and were dead silent. I couldn't hear them move over the sound of the stream. This is when I am proper spooked. As I kept going and they kept following me, I started to move closer to the opposite bank as often as could, and was walking slower than usual in the shifting sands and rushing water, making sure that I didn't lose my footing. Every 5 meters or so, I would stop to locate them, but there were several times that I lost where they were. I didn't need to see them to feel their eyes out in the woods. Over time, they stopped staying parallel with me and began to stay slightly behind me. After what felt like an eternity, I made it to my 5th sampling spot 95 meters into the stream. Just my luck that day. The longest sampling for the day had wild dogs. I felt a wave of relief since I could now turn around and make my way back to the van, but I had to stay in the stream since the stream banks were still too steep to climb out. The dogs had a different plan. All the way through the stream they stayed together, but now they split up. One stayed about 3 to 5 meters ahead of me, while the other one was behind me about 3 to 5 meters. They hadn't made an advance and were still hiding in the woods, but having one in front and one behind filled me with dread. Walking in, it was easy to keep my back from being exposed and face them, even if I couldn't see them, but now things changed. I turned so I was parallel with the stream banks the dogs were on and began to make my way downstream. The dogs maintained this pattern for about 70 meters before things become decidedly more dangerous. About 20 meters from the clearing, there is a gradual slope that leads to the water on the dog's side of the stream. The dog ahead of me stretches its lead while the one behind me comes down the slope and enter the stream with me. I raise my meter stick towards the dog in the water and my subber sampler net to the dog on the stream bank in front of me and begin to yell. Basically, I look like the science nerd version of the gladiator with the net and trident. I can see the clearing, but my eyes just keep darting from dog to dog, and I am slowing backing towards the clearing. The water near the stream dog deepens, and luckily for me, it doesn't want to swim for its meal. It runs up the slope and joins its comrades still ahead of me. From here until the gravelly steep slope on my side of the stream, the dogs stay ahead of me, hiding in the brush, but never making a move. I scrambled up the slope and started making my way to the van. The dogs come out of the woods and advance to the edge of the stream bank. I just kept facing them while backing my up to the van. Once I got back to the van, I hurriedly packed everything back up and left before I could eat my lunch at the stream site. I had to return to that stream about 8 more times, but I never saw those dogs again. It was the longest 2 hours of my life. I was driving west on US Highway 2 between the city of Ball Club and Benham, Minnesota. This occurred on March 3, 2019 at around 7:15 p.m. I was approaching a black vehicle, and as I got closer it increased its speed, keeping pace with me. I was within 100 yards of the vehicle. It went into the oncoming lane of traffic and accelerated, causing the rear of the vehicle to drop slightly. At that instant, a very large cloud of white smoke filled the highway. I slowed my vehicle and turned toward the shoulder on the north side of the highway. As I went through the cloud, I expected to see the vehicle stopped or black marks on the road. Once I was in the cloud, I could see out, but it was still thick. I watched the ditch on the south side of the highway as well, but saw no evidence of the vehicle leaving the roadway. I expected to smell burnt rubber from the tires skidding or spinning on the highway, but there was no smell. As I came out of the cloud, I could see for a couple of miles as the highway was straight. There were vehicles approaching from some distance to the front, but no one going in my direction. I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was another vehicle coming around the cloud on the north side also. I wanted to stop that vehicle to see what they saw and thought of the encounter, but I didn't feel comfortable with that, knowing how to get them to stop. All I can tell you about the vehicle is that it was a mid-size black sedan. Nothing special at all about it. I couldn't wrap my head around what I had just seen, and for nearly an hour the hair on my arms stood straight on end. It was a very strange experience. I didn't see it in the air or anything, so maybe not connected to a UFO. The only other explanation I can conclude would be spiritual, or a ghost, if you will. No matter what, I am still very freaked out and bothered by what I witnessed. When I was very young, under 10, my dad would take us to various deer leases for the weekends here in central Texas. There were always cabins of some sort for us to stay in. This one weekend we went to a lease near Eagle Lake, where there was an old frame house, one-room affair really, that was at the end of a very windy road. You couldn't see the house until you came right up on it. Well, this one weekend we came driving out of the Oaks only to notice that there was smoke coming from the chimney, trash all over the yard, etc. There weren't any vehicles though. My dad stopped the truck, got out his rifle, glassed the house for a little while, then decided whoever was there must have cleared out when they heard the truck coming, and seeing as how there was no way we would have missed a vehicle leaving, they must have bugged out on foot. I still have dreams 20 years later about walking into the house to look around. Whoever had been there obviously loved to smoke, as there were ashes and cig butts everywhere. Most of the canned goods we stored up there had been eaten, the cans dumped in the yard, and there was a pot of deer corn, yes, deer corn, boiling on the stove. The thing that has stuck with me over the years was the smell and the open coloring books scattered on the table with crayons dropped in mid-coloring. Out there in the woods was some poor family with at least one kid. I imagined they sat watching us for quite some time before giving up and wandering off. My dad, lacking much sense, decided that we were staying the weekend. Yeah, didn't sleep much. My hunting partner Ed and I were into the second week of the Oregon bow season. It was about 6 when we came upon a stock pond. These ponds are fed by a small spring or small creek. We decided to circumnavigate it to see if we could see what was watering in the area. I went left, Ed went to the right. I hadn't gone far when I came to a depression in the muddy, gravelly pond edge. It looked like a very big, heavy person had left a footprint there. I got down and saw that there were toe impressions at the front. Well, I called Ed over to see this, and he said there was another one behind the first. We backtracked the prints and found what appeared to be skid marks on the hillside of the pond. This was just next to the small trickle of water which fed the pond. The hair on the back of my neck stood right up. We went up the hill for about 40 yards, but found indistinguishable impressions in the trashy undergrowth. We went back down and tracked them in the other direction, and the impressions overturned pebbles, Broken and bent grasses went about 100 yards down a hill into a ravine thick with manzanita and small scrub oak. We then went back to the foot tracks and covered them with logs so they wouldn't be destroyed. Went home and got some plaster of Paris. We made the impressions and we were shocked to find that there were definitely toes on one cast. The other was in too much gravel to make a good impression. At the same time, I took some pictures of Ed stretching to match the stride of the prince. The next week, we went into the same area, same skid road, about 300 yards past the stock tank. We were walking side by side when something to my left and slightly behind us, up the hill approximately 100 yards, something caught my eye. I spun around to see what it was, and to my astonishment, I saw a pair of legs running into the thick underbrush. I couldn't see all of it because of the trees. My impression was of a two-legged creature animal, with long brown hair on the legs running away from us. Ed saw the branches swinging back into place, but saw nothing else. We both got spooked and quickly went back to the truck and never hunted there again. I gave the plaster cast to my nephew in San Jose, California, and have never seen them again. I still have the photos of Ed stretching to match the stride. The footprints measured 18 foot long by 6 across the heel and 8 foot across the ball of the foot. I got some hair samples from a star thistledown in the ravine, and I still have them. I have to preface this story by saying that what I'm about to recount is a true story. I know it sounds like something out of a horror movie, but I assure you every word I'm about to share is as real as the road I drive on. My name is Jack, and I've been a trucker for over a decade. I've seen my fair share of strange things on the open road. So it was a usual route for me, driving along a desolate highway late at night. The moon was obscured by heavy clouds, casting an eerie glow over the barren landscape. That's when I saw him, standing on the side of the road, thumb outstretched. The hitchhiker seemed ordinary enough at first glance, dressed in worn-out jeans and a tattered jacket. With a sigh, I decided to offer him a ride. Little did I know, that decision would alter the course of my life forever. As the journey progressed, I couldn't shake an unsettling feeling. Strange occurrences began to unfold, and I started to question my decision to pick up this hitchhiker. The air in the cab grew heavy with an otherworldly presence, and I caught glimpses of an unnatural shadow out of the corner of my eye. It was as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around us. Then, without warning, the hitchhiker's face twisted in agony, and he vomited onto the floor of the truck. I immediately pulled over, concern etched across my face. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling with worry. But as I glanced at him, something unfathomable happened. The hitchhiker's body convulsed and contorted in an inhuman manner. His form began to change before my eyes, morphing into a creature that defied all logic. It was a creature I struggle to find words to describe, but I'll do my best. It was completely white, bald, impossibly thin, and its humanoid shape lacked any discernible facial features. No eyes, no nose, nothing. It loomed over me, crouched in a position that made its true height difficult to determine. But let me tell you, it was towering at least 9 feet tall. Fear coursed through my veins, overpowering any sense of rationality. In a panic, I threw open the door and sprinted as fast as my trembling legs could carry me. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. Only after what felt like an eternity did I finally slow down and catch my breath. But the creature was nowhere in sight. It hadn't followed me. After gathering my wits, I cautiously made my way back to the truck. My heart sank as I realized it was empty, as if the hitchhiker and the creature had vanished into thin air. Confusion and dread consumed me. To this day, I can't explain what I saw or what became of the hitchhiker or the creature. All I know is that my encounter that night was undeniably real. Growing up, we had a big house on the water set back a couple acres from the road. Most of the land around us was swamp, and when I was 14, my dog brought up part of a human arm. Mom and I were binging Heroes 2007 and Biscuit got out. We ignored him, and I saw the dog rush past the library window with what looked like a big owlfish swinging in his jaw. I go on to bed, and she hollers for me and comes to my room wide-eyed. I don't what this is. I go out, and it's past the truck and garage in the wide empty space that was there. I shine a light on it, and I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing. It's a piece of flesh with 3 little bones sticking out of one end. My vision does a complete 360, and I curse and look at Mom, who looks terrified. "Ma, you need to call the cops." The police show up, poke it with a stick, then put it in a bag and hold it out the window as they drove to the substation. We later heard reports on CNN about people being cut up and their bodies strewn all along the panhandle. The arm was large and flabby with what looked like a small pox scar. Our area used to be a hiding place for criminals and bodies. People used to find corpses in their yards after heavy rains. We even had a guy break out of prison transport and run through our yard in the middle of the night. Gotta love Florida. I was around 15 years old and lived and still living there in the wonderful Bavarian landscape in a small village. As you might know, we in Bavaria are proud of our tradition and our beer, and so we had something what you would call a party or carnival, only for people of our village. As I was the cool boy in our village, I told the other kids what we can play. We played football, soccer first, but I got bored and asked my friends if we are going to run around the village and play with our wooden, and a friend of mine even had a softer, just a weak one, though guns. So we went into barns and all that stuff and shoot each other. It was great fun. Till one point we were in a barn of an old farmer, but everyone liked him 'cause he always gave us sweets and told us funny things. He was 83 at that point. One room of the barn was the old slaughter room. When we played in there, in front of us was an old door, but it was locked. But I could have sworn I heard something like a quiet clicking. Generally, it was a really old barn, and my dad told me that it has some underground tunnels and rooms 'cause of the World War II. The years did pass, and the old man died. His wife died almost 10 years ago, and the only son and heir decided to demolish the old barn. What they found in the room with the locked door is still kinda a mystery, and police and news were all at the place, but nobody besides the police and the special teams knew what it was. Later, the newspapers got the information that there was an old bomb of the WW2. But fortunately, my dad helped the son with the work and saw it first together with the son. He never told me till a few months ago. Until that day, only few people knew the real story. He basically built something like a throne of old World War II souvenirs as a national coat of arms and pictures of Austrian painter. There were old radios and medal of Nazis, and a lot of letters in which he wrote about operate behind enemy lines, and in which he wrote to his wife and that she has to be quiet. In the middle of the room there was the bomb, and it was indeed still ticking, and one of the best obtained bombs of the World War, and is now in a museum. Diffused. No one knew he was that guy. I was so shocked, and I can only tell you that people in our village still tell rumors about more tunnels and hidden rooms.
Thanks for listening. Hope you already fallen asleep. See you tomorrow at the same time.